Welcome back to the PFC Podcast. The views and opinions you are about to hear are the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of anyone else. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the PFC Podcast. This is Dennis, and this episode was recorded with the sponsorship and support of the Special Operations Medical Association. Thank you guys very much, and I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Thank you all for having me here again. I believe if anybody's been covering this conference for a while, you see me speak a couple times throughout my career.
I firmly believe in this conference's ability to create partners to share knowledge. I will tell you that I have never been so nervous as I am presented here today. And this is probably my 8th one. There's a pit in my stomach every time I think about this problem. Courage, in the absence of fear, is stupidity. And if you're not afraid of this mission, you're stupid. This is one of the hardest things that we could probably ever try to accomplish as a team together. And every time I think about making it happen, it makes me sick to my stomach. Because I have just enough context on what these operational realities will be. And thank Jared Arche. And my background, again, I believe my background just lends validity to the fact that I think this is such a difficult operational environment. Sorry, I should roll on my first slide. But 23 years trying to figure stuff out and scared as hell in the water. Like all good Navy SEALs, I am hydrophilic. All right, in this presentation, we're going to try to understand some of the perspectives of the challenges. We'll talk about openly, and hopefully this is more of a conversation later. Understand the alignment of all that tactical and strategic and how operational medicine is going to flow together. And then instead of completely being a Debbie Downer, getting up here just telling you how hard it is, I'm going to offer some ideas that I have on some practical solutions that we can do. So the first thing you need to understand about working in this environment is the old adage, if the enemy gets a vote, the ocean gets two. We'll talk about some examples of that from my operational career. And I really think it's a terrible mistake if we're to look at this problem and we get focused on just the medicine. So a couple mantras of mine that I've had for years that I firmly believe in is that you should be training to carry knowledge, not equipment. We need this knowledge. Another one that I use, and I hope it translates well, is that fairy dust kills. Anytime that you insert into a training week program, and I think there was a lot of talk about training today, that notionality, or let's just imagine, I believe there's a huge mistake that we can make it tackling this challenge together, where we say things like, oh, the casualty just showed up at the pier. Now work on your stabilization. And then, oh, magic, because we're afraid of hurting someone, let's just move him from the pier to the boat. Where we're going to lose a lot of our logistical learning, a lot of our operational challenges that we can overcome with mindset if we practice in a buoy. So we'll talk about the 5 pillars that I delineated for maritime medicine later. But just to give you some perspective, the context of how I approach this problem, I'm a voracious reader, student of history. So I think that there is a lot of operational context that we can take for some of our historical literature that's been written about this. I believe the Parachute Board is one of the better ones of Yugoslavia. If you haven't gotten a chance to read it, there's a couple. There's Lindsay Rogers, Kiwi surgeon, is also out there. There's a couple other papers. This was one of my favorites. And I love this quote from him, right? It's not about the equipment. It's about the knowledge and the mindset. I feel like we've got to voraciously hold on to the fact that our mindset and our training is what's really going to fix this problem. And I also believe, in the words of Mayamada Musashi, to know about all things is to know about one thing. I feel that we can learn a lot for trying to tackle this operational challenge by reading about things that are very, very similar but not quite the same. I feel like the Shetland Bus is a must-read if you're thinking about this problem. This is a great book, and you're going to see a lot of these key points are going to come up again. Operational autonomy, mission agility. I'm going to tackle that. And just to be all fair, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. There's a lot of my thoughts that I have put into this that we're going to talk about later. These are all fantastic resources. Take the time to take a picture. I believe Dennis is going to post this later. Every one of these is worth the read. There are thoughts and ideas that I pulled out of every one of these references and then combined it with my operational context. All right, I wanted to bring this up. This is a personal thought. If you haven't read this book, I also highly suggest it. I think there's a huge error that we could make if we're going to start tackling this problem, where we could get platform-centric. My engineers in the room, please don't get mad at me. I do want an underwater autonomous drone that delivers oxygen and has whistles and bells and can loiter and do 360s, but not yet. Let's not let the military, industrial, congressional industry overrun this problem and muddle the waters. Maritime reference, I got it in there. For tackling this problem. So, in tackling this problem, context is important. I added an additional pillar to the 4 pillars of irregular warfare, and that is communication change, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen, right? If we look at our specific challenges, it's the operational unpredictability. It's that long duration of care. Is anybody here ever going fishing with a buddy and he says, hey, I'm going to go put the boat in the water. It'll take me like 30 minutes. Meet me out there. Does that ever happen? It never happens. It always takes longer than anticipated. In everything, anytime you deal with the water. And then here's another important one. Why does this become so challenging? Here's my thought. If you're going to move somebody from land to the water, at some point you're going to have to go through a natural choke point. And the enemy is out there looking. You have to give up operational security at some point to make that transition. And when you have enemy interdiction going on, it changes the game. All right, I love this. I had a friend text me. He was like, hey, do you have an example of the different kinds of ships and the equipment they might have on them? No, nobody has that. It doesn't exist. Nobody really understands. Because everything's going to change on that boat. Sure, you can look up the schematics of what fishing vessel they're using, but you don't know how they've modified it. You don't know what's going to happen. Everything changes with the water. There is no standard playbook for maritime, because when you start talking about international and then factoring in like host nation partners, planning on it is just planning on it's going to get you hurt. There is none. And the harsh environment, right, cannot be overstated. Here's the other reason. The ocean doesn't read the textbooks. It really doesn't. I was just talking with a good friend of mine last night as we were talking about the challenges of the maritime environment. And he brought up this awesome story of one time he was diving the Puget Sound Bay. And he checked 2 charts, and he's not an idiot. And he really he checked the charts, he checked the tide tables, and all of a sudden he was stuck at depth with the 29 currents sucking him out the sound. And he was using his dive knife and a broken prop that he found on the seafloor and using it to self-arrest and pull himself out of the water. The ocean is unpredictable, and it's mean, and it's nasty. The other one too, there's a reality of people who've worked around the water. Water and all sorts of telecommunication go terrible. That's why I'm an advocate for different types of communication, and why I put so much emphasis on being able to change communicate, right? We're going to need to think about that in a different context than just getting on the radio. I'm talking about things like going back to the OSS style of using light signaling devices, using markers, using some craft that's possibly integrated in to how we communicate. Simple things. As my movement team is coming down the road, maybe I leave some sort of signal that tells them which of the BLSs I've decided to set up for them. Beach landing site that I've decided to set up for them, because I trained one of my Post Nation guys to be sitting out there for the last 4 hours for me, and he delivered a surf observation report back to World War II, and UDT guys, love them, of exactly where the rip currents are. That's important. That's not a minor detail. That's something you have to know if you're going to work in the ocean well. And the last one is the surf zone, the littoral zone, the last thing you have to get through and the most challenging thing to get through. So I've been told before that I have a gift for direct communication and simple thinking. I take it as a compliment. This is my simple thinking on the challenges of the littoral zone and how I break down what I in my operational context feel like you have to take in. And we could talk, I want to have more conversation with this. Hopefully it translates over, right? Very simply, I give up certain operational parameters as I gain one under. And I think this matrix, well, we'll see. We'll see how much I get beaten down one later. We'll talk more. Hey, another great paper. I don't know this major, but man, I wish I did. I really wish I did. This is a fantastic paper he did. But I want to highlight deliberate. Now, there's a difference between deliberate planning and over planning. I feel like it's in maritime environment, we could make a real mistake where we play the 15 minutes early game, where we try and control everything in our environment, so we over militarily plan. The 15 minutes early game is when I tell you to show up at training at 9 o'clock. And then the next person goes, man, I don't want to be late, so I want you to show up 15 minutes earlier. And the next person's like, ooh, I better give him 15 more minutes. And all of a sudden, my little SEAL platoon is getting there 2 hours before the evolution even changes. And that's not planning. I don't think you could overly plan this, and then you're just going to have a really detailed list of shit that the ocean's going to laugh at. So you need to plan in operational autonomy and flexibility. Okay, Noel, how do we do that? Oh, sorry, one more slide because this is a great way. Man, again, I haven't met the person who wrote this paper. I thought it was a fantastic paper, worth reading. I think it's a really great way this table laid it out. And I stole it, straight stealing this idea of decentralized casualty response. That's what DCRS stands for. So again, we can talk about some of these later. All right, so what do? Got to be modular. Got to be austere system. If we set up, got to be small. You got to be flexible. Got to be highly trained. These are all lessons we've learned in World War II. We can replicate these again. A little typo here, I'll own it. Incorporates several facets of operational medicine and operational specialists into a joint multi-talented team. Why did I just say joint right there? I shouldn't ask a Russian unless I expected a response. Sorry. I asked joint there for a reason. I said put joint there for a reason. Because I think this maritime environment is an epic pop fly situation that could just get dropped. Sorry for my international partners that aren't understanding my baseball reference. It's where you're trying to catch a ball and it falls in between 3 or 4 people and nobody's really sure who's going to catch that ball. Everybody thinks somebody else is going to do it, and then it just drops in the middle of you. That's what that analogy is supposed to be. Because who are my regular warfare experts? Are they going to take care of this? Is it going to be all USASOC? How am I going to incorporate MARSOC? What's NSW going to do? How is the logistical support going to happen? Again, I feel like the way to tackle this problem is a joint effort. That way we get the specialties of everyone working together. Tremendously respect my MARSOC guys, but if I'm going to do an OTB, it's really going to be, that's an NSW-centric mission. We do it all the time. Now, training host nation forces would probably not me, so I could use some help. Okay, so my suggestion for setting up these cells, again, I think the idea of the cells are important, that we can have redundancy built in. I don't want to read the slide completely. If you remember what I said, like redundancy, cross-training, because there's different kind of logistics specialists. I was going to use Jesse, but he's distracted. There's all kinds of specialties within logistics. It doesn't mean that each person can do it well, but I feel like learning someone else's job and understanding the context of their challenges can be super important also. And I'll bring up an operation example where I came up with that idea. And again, this change of demand. And this change communication cell, very, very important, because I believe the plan is going to change all the time, and we need a dedicated person to be able to communicate to the rest of the chain, someone who is a specialist in this and has multiple options to make that communication happen. And again, just a little throughout, because I can't not be a smartass, a little Samka. All right, so keeping with the theme of being a smartass, here's what I took, is I have my logistical specialists who are all cross-trained, but now I'm going to bake in more operational flexibility by, instead of just saying the logistics cell is going to take care of all logistics, I have a logistics specialist who's cross-trained in all aspects of logistics, not necessarily perfect at all of them, but has the context to understand the challenges of safely curing food. But mainly they're a truck driver. And I organize them into functional cells, and these functional cells can support each other. They can give personnel back and forth by operational requirements. Maybe I don't need 4 treatment people there at the surgical response, right? And I feel too that by segregating who and what I need at each functional unit, I can protect my specialist. I think this is an important thought. I only need to use my surgeon when I need a surgeon. I don't need my surgeon out there helping me getting a guy ready in a Zodiac boat to launch across the beach. I need to hand that over to another functional unit that is one better prepared and protecting my capabilities that are very specialized, right? Probably my human intelligence specialists don't need to be seen down helping me set up a robo system to lower someone down a cliff, but maybe they do. Maybe my geospatial guy who understands the tides and charts better than anyone else, but is cross-trained and understands some of the human intelligence challenges and what's going on in that shop, can be on my rip riders team, and he can be up top helping me figure out how to lower a casualty on some sea cliffs. By the way, sea cliffs are awesome to get out on. And be there supporting that functional unit.
Hopefully we have more conversations about this. You guys poke some holes in it.
Again, this was me reading a bunch, operational context, trying to figure stuff out. I feel like I've heard this a lot, so I'm just going to reiterate. Let's focus on training. Training is what these guys need the most. I probably don't need a new carbon fighting emitter, but I could use an extra 4 days of medical training every year. And not necessarily medical training. I could use training in getting this all done. I think this, maybe disjointed to talk about here, but tackling this operational challenge, because it's so hard, can make me better at doing all other aspects of IDEL. And I have a written playbook for medicine. I have measurable, I have my MOPEs and MOs, right? My measures of effectiveness and my measurements of performance that I could see, okay, did my casualty response chain work? I could take objectivity out of it, and I could look at the medical treatments that were provided over what time, and that can give me an assessment of how well I've done setting up this chain of evacuation. I feel like you don't have time to read the rest of this, but I want to highlight exercises where failure is it's what we want done. We want to push to failure. And then this is a place that I would take a book from the Ukrainians and their Brave One marketplace right now, where they're giving points, they're assigning points for kills, drone kills, and then allowing those units, those subordinate units that are doing the best, to make the highest level decision on what the tactics and new equipment should be. So I feel like we could set up training exercises where failure is the point, but then be gathering feedback from these students that have performed the best on what it was they needed to get over those humps. So illuminating our challenges and enabling our high performers to come up with the solutions themselves. Again, I think streamlining that chain. Every book you read is going to talk about integrating with host nation partners. Fantastic. But I feel like if you show up and try to integrate in with them right away without your own playbook built first, it's a mistake. So I advocate for training first, figuring out exactly how I'm going to do things, and then working with integrating host nation partners like the Shetland bus, using the fishermen. Once I have my playbook TTP set, and then I could do exercises where I get my guys out developing their soft skills of integrating into a force like that. Again, leading on my joint partners who might be better at that than me to help me get better at it for the joint mission. And then I even hesitate to talk about technology solutions because I do think the kill chain error could pop up once again where you want to fix all my problems with technology. I advocate to let technology be the last solution. Training in people first, figure out exactly what we need, and then by all means, you could get me a fancy motorized scooter that zips me through the surf zone. I would love that. But let's figure out if I need it first. All right, I'll let you guys soak that in a bit. I don't want to read the whole thing because I want to talk about it. This is me taking a huge objectivity bite of humble pie myself. There's commands there in STEM Space Center that I'm not a huge fan of, but they're there, so let's use them. And some other things I'd like to bring on. There's dedicated people down there who are doing great training, and they do have a fantastic relationship with the NOLA EMS services, nursing services, the local police department, the local fishing fleet, the local geo oil platform. There's a lot of resources there. It gives us space that we could practice all of this in a controlled environment. Yeah, I hope I did the Robin Sage tap Maritime thing right. Can't really check yourself on Robin Sage, but I believe that everyone's familiar with this exercise. And again, I read a great paper from the Naval Postgraduate School about how to identify operational deficiencies, and it's the .mlf Tech I, and it gives it's a procedure for doctorate and operation training. I don't remember all of that, and it's under the Joint Community Infrastructure Development System. Fantastic. I love doing all that. Let's crunch all the numbers and do that. But at the same time, I would like to include in some of this practical application so we could test it. To me, it's like the old taco commercial. Do I want theoretical or practical? Do I want hard shell or soft shell? They sell a package that we could have both. And we're going to be better off for it if we do it in parallel effort together. Last, this is why I advocate for it. We have commanders talk about forward thinking all the time. I believe we're to set up some sort of joint agency that could tackle this problem. That's real forward thinking. It fixes a lot of our problems. Who are we going to ask if this underwater patient sled works? Now we have a place that we can ask. And we have a place that they can test it out in operational context. Again, thank you for giving me your time. These are my humble opinions. Please read for yourself, research for yourself, think deeply on this subject. I think it's a very, very scary and difficult environment, but if we conquer it together, we'll all be better for it. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
That's it for today's podcast. Make sure to go to our website, www.prolongedfieldcare.org. Check out our free downloads and a ton of other helpful information. Grab a bag of our fresh roasted PFC coffee, links in the description below, and stay on the bleeding edge of combat and austere medicine. This is Dennis for the PFC Podcast, out.